Well, good afternoon, football fans. We are here once again for another edition of Orange Weekly. My name is Brent from syracuse.com, right alongside my friend and colleague Nate Mink from syracuse.com. And we are here to talk Syracuse football with you. We appreciate those of you that have joined us live here. Usually we do this on Thursdays. Today is Friday. Do not adjust your calendars. Ran into some complications yesterday, so we pushed the show to today because we've got some football to discuss. And you are free to hop in, my friends, no matter where you're watching. Leave some comments. We'll highlight some of them as we go and get your thoughts on Syracuse football. As Nate and I were just discussing before we hit the live button here, it's been a week, Nate. It's been a really interesting week for Syracuse football in terms of some things that have happened to the head coach, some things that the coach has to decide on in this game. And you know what? I actually want to start with that note. I think the worst thing we can do is kind of come into a game like this and just say it's going to be a routine day, because it never seems to work out that way. And all you have to do is go back to Holy Cross a couple of years ago. Now, it was a routine win, but it turned out that there was a pretty significant injury in that game that we tracked throughout that 2019 season.
Right. Maybe we should do the show on Friday every week, just so we get the whole gamut of the news cycle here week to week. Because you're right, we had we done this on Thursday, since Thursday we've learned that Dino is in fact expected to coach in the game on Saturday after having that close contact with a COVID case. We have a point spread that came out yesterday after not having one for most of the week, and we have some juicy quarterback discourse that we'll get into. But you're right, Brent. Just when you think you have everything figured out in this sport, there's always a curveball lurking around the corner. And you referenced the Holy Cross game a couple of years ago. That was a as pedestrian as a win as you will see in a season. Syracuse got in and out relatively cleanly. But, Tommy DeVito, the starting quarterback that year, got hit in the wrong place and dealt with an injury that, to his credit, he played through for most of that season. But, there were certainly some lingering effects to how he was able to go out there and play week to week that obviously stemmed from that collision against Holy Cross. So really just goes to show you that, even though Syracuse is a big favorite in this game, even though they're expected to get a pretty healthy diet of personnel working into the lineup this week, we can learn a lot from weeks like this, and these kind of games can in fact change the complexion of the season. I can even remember going back at this point 6 years ago to Scott Schaefer's final season, the season opener, the home opener in 2015. Terrell Hunt, the first series of the season, Achilles injury, Rhode Island, done for the year. Insert Eric Dungy. Now, we didn't know at that time what we were.
It worked out, but still, these things can happen.
Go on with Eric, but that really goes to show that anything can happen week to week, irrespective of health and long-term personnel. Jacksonville State beat Florida State last week. Montana went up to Washington and beat the Huskies in week one. There have been a pretty diverse litany of upsets at the FCS level against FBS teams, and in no way, shape, or form am I necessarily predicting Albany to come down Route 90 or Interstate 90 and shock the world on Saturday. But it's very easy for people to just not want to tune in or just think, they're going to win by 50 points. But you got to watch to make sure nothing that changes the complexion of the season happens in some of these games.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Nate, as highlighted on the screen here, our friend Rob agrees with you, saying Florida State is not the Florida State of old, but look what happened to them against Jacksonville State. Syracuse needs to be physically and mentally prepared to get it done tomorrow. My friend Jermaine, very loyal viewer here on Orange Weekly in the post-game show, says, afternoon, easy win for Syracuse tomorrow. And Shelby here wants to see some more targets for Courtney Jackson. Now, that is one of the big things, Nate, with this matchup tomorrow, and that is deciding who the quarterback is. Dino Babers on ESPN Radio this week made it pretty clear that they're going to make a decision on who their starter is after this game. And I think there's some people that would say, well, why the Albany game, right? What is the Albany game going to tell you? I think you can look at it in the opposite way, in this way, saying, well, Albany gives you essentially a controlled experiment. In theory, right? We just said be careful of things that can happen. But in theory, Albany gives you a controlled experiment. The receivers are going to be open. Maybe you target guys like Courtney Jackson more. And you really see in a Carrier Dome, indoors, in a clear talent gap, who can go out there in a practice that counts and show the most, who can make the connections with the receivers, who can scramble out of trouble, who can run an offense the best, because we still haven't figured that out to this point. So I get some people that would say, what is Albany going to tell you? But I look at it from two ways. That, and two, Nate, I mean, it just feels like they've got to make a decision here. Enough flirting, hand out a rose, give somebody the starting job, and let's see what goes from here.
Well, who do they play next week?
They play Liberty next week. So
okay.
You better lock in on somebody, because that quarterback on the other side is pretty good. Yeah.
What is Liberty capable of doing offensively? You know, putting up 40 points on you with an NFL quarterback and an SEC coach, right?
That's right.
You know, they have almost their entire roster back from last year's one-loss team. So Liberty's no joke, and I think that I think speaks to the timing of this more than anything. You know, it doesn't matter if it's Albany. It's, you know, come next week they got a legitimate test. And then after that, you're rolling through 8 straight league games. So your schedule tightens up, and it's time. And I think Dino talked about this Thursday night on his radio show, that the longer you play both, the more you have to rep them in practice. So you're taking reps away from who potentially is your starting quarterback. So you're putting, to some degree, a limit on what their ceiling can be this year if you keep rotating the other guy in. And he also intimated that, you know, the offense might run better with one guy in versus the other guy in. And so you're now putting a little bit of stress and tension on the 10 other guys on that offensive unit, whether it's the receivers, whether it's the offensive line. And it, you know, the theme that has been staring us in the face for, you know, however many years now, 3 years, is that it takes all 11 guys on offense to be on the same page, or this offense is not very productive and doesn't score enough points to really be competitive against some of the stronger teams on your schedule. So I think they're going to roll out there. I think they're going to, and Dino, I think, was very, very careful with his words towards the tail end of this week too. He said there was a predetermined plan going into Saturday's game, but he reserves the right to to change that as needed. And so it would be really interesting to see if he's going to, say, insert Schrader at a specific or designated point in the game, like last week when, you know, he told both quarterbacks that Schrader was definitely going to go in the second quarter, irrespective of what the game was like. You know, here he kind of let a little bit more wiggle room for himself. You know, I think he might play this a little bit more closely to how he played the opener at Ohio, where if things are rolling well with one quarterback, he's going to let that hot hand continue. You know, the hope is that the score at some point gets to a certain point where, you know, it doesn't matter who's out there. You have the ability to play both guys. And then I think, you know, really it is decision time after Saturday, and it shouldn't matter. I don't think it will matter whether both quarterbacks play exceptional. I think even if to the fan base there is still this ambiguity on really who the best option is, I think Dino is ready to make a decision. And you know, truthfully, this is me talking. I think he knows who it is right now, and I think the only way he moves off that is if something unexpected happens on Saturday afternoon. Well,
some good questions from our commenters here, Nate. One from David. You mentioned the plan: give quarterbacks each a half to prove themselves, and I think if we're in a world that's not ideal, and even Dino Babers said this week he doesn't like doing this, as you noted, to take away the reps. I think that's better than what they did last week, and it's a different opponent, mind you. And let's keep in mind, there were some drops last week. There were some things beyond the fault of the quarterbacks, but both quarterbacks overthrew receivers. Garrett Schrader notably overthrew 3 deep balls that probably could have made a difference. Not that Tommy DeVito didn't, but DeVito was more affected by drops than overthrows last week. But to this point, nobody has really grabbed the offense by the throat and said it's mine. So I wonder if the half approach is better. You mentioned you feel it out, see how it goes. Albany is the perfect team to make this decision against. And Antonio notes maybe a lot of fans feel like, I don't care who he picks at this point, pick someone and make a decision, which is what he's going to do after this game. Downtown J.R. Brown, like that Twitter name, says getting Davis back and getting a larger wide receiver established on the outside could be wonders in all of this discussion. And that's kind of what I'm wondering about, Nate, is how much more you can open up the offense in a situation like this. Get an Alfred out there, get an Aronde Gatson out there. I don't know how ready they are at this point. They're certainly big targets, but I don't think anything really can be off the table at this point. So all options on the table. I won't even throw the thing to the tight end take that I always have, because that's just out there and is always something that should happen if you can open up the field and make that work. But we're going to know after this weekend. Let me rephrase that. They're going to make a decision after this weekend. Will we know who the quarterback is? I guess is still going to be the question, because you noted it, Nate. Liberty is going to be the ultimate answer to that question and how they play in a game like that.
And I don't think just because he makes the decision, after Saturday's game, doesn't mean we're not going to see the other guy the rest of the season.
Right.
This is still a situation where, they need to win games, and, he's going to play this by feel week to week. I really believe that if who he deems to be the guy after Saturday isn't getting the job done, I don't think he's going to hem and haw and hesitate to make a change if the circumstances warrant that. And there still might be, again, situations that or defensive looks that show up on tape where they might want to roll it with another option, depending on what the defense gives you or shows you. So by no means do I think to write off whoever is deemed, the number 2 after Saturday, because I do think, we got a long season ahead of us. A lot can happen, and I would bet 10-1 that you probably will still need to see and use both quarterbacks before the end of November.
Well, Nate, to change subjects a little bit, one thing that has been consistent for this team and is encouraging for this team is the play of that defense. Mikel Jones at linebacker notably has been a standout. Deuce Chestnut, of course, had a terrific first game of the season. I thought made some plays last week against Rutgers as well. Marlo Wax has been impressive. I mean, you can go through a lot of names. I just like the attitude in which the defense plays with. I like the confidence in which they play with. I think both you and I wrote it after the game that it feels like this is a defense that could keep this team in a lot of games and give opportunities to the offense. And again, I think the Liberty game is going to be a big test in that realm. But boy, at least you could feel good about that. Now, are they going to have bad days? Of course they are. I mean, you can't expect them to kind of play at that rate week in and week out. But I feel like big picture wise, more often than not, this is a defense that's at least going to give you a chance and is going to give that offense every opportunity to come out there and make some things happen. The one thing we haven't seen from them yet is the rate of takeaways that they've had the past couple of years, which, by the way, is top 5 in the country. I think that'll come just, based on the way they play and how they practice it. And it's a point of emphasis in that defense. But, hey, at least you could say the defense is great. They hit, they fly around the field, they play with confidence. And, as we noted, maybe they're going to keep this team in some more games than we think.
And I think the turnovers will come. I just saw the stat in front of me. And again, we're going back multiple years here and multiple defensive coordinators and multiple systems. But Bama and Clemson are the only 2 schools to force more turnovers over a 3-year period than the Orange. So
it's pretty good.
This has been the calling card for that side of the ball. Like I said, over multiple seasons, multiple coordinators, multiple systems, and Tony White's got these guys playing loose, playing free. They know what they're doing. I think it helps that they have all their personnel, all their best personnel on the field playing at a high level for the most part. I mean, I know they were out a couple defensive linemen, but to guys credit, like Cody Roscoe, like Curtis Harper, guys who maybe have shouldered a little bit more snap percentage than usual. They've played well. Cody had multiple TFLs against Rutgers. Harper's giving you good reps inside with when McKinley Williams was out. Now you have Bear back in the middle, makes them a little bit stronger up front. And the linebackers obviously are very talented. You mentioned Jones. He's He's leading the league in tackles through 2 games. Stephon Thompson is all over the ball. Marlo Wax is a good young player for them. Jeff Canton, I mean, that's a guy that started all of last season. He's now your quote depth or your rotational piece. So they got a lot of guys back there, and they're playing at a high level. The thing that's jumped out to me is they are not missing many tackles right now, and they are getting after guys, and they are striking guys behind the line of scrimmage or only 1 or 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, and they are not being dragged forward for the most part. They are knocking guys back for the most part. Really, really like the way they look right now on that side of the ball. Needless to say, but like we all know, there are bigger and greater challenges that await them coming up here very, very shortly. So,
Nate, we said at the top of the show, it's been an interesting week for Syracuse in terms of the quarterback decision, what's going into that. The week itself brought upon a little bit of, I don't want to say a scare, maybe that would be a strong word, but a concern that Dino Babers had come in contact with somebody who tested positive for COVID-19. So it was a little touch and go whether or not he was going to coach in this game. But as I saw our friend Mike Curtis lurking here in the comments, good to see Mike in there, as he wrote about yesterday and reported on. So Dino took a test, came out negative, and he's still following all the university protocols at this point in terms of masking and distancing and everything, just to be sure. But he did his radio program last night as normal, and kind of was at practice throughout the week until they determined what that was. But it just goes to show you in this world we live in today, all the protocols in the world and everything, and you be safe, but it can take just one situation. You can come in contact with somebody. And the big thing there is, I guess timing was good, because can you beat Albany without your head coach on the sideline? You'd like to think so, but what if you find yourself in this situation against a key ACC opponent, even a Liberty next week? So just goes to show you how vigilant these guys have to be, and how a scare like that can come up, and you got to have plan B, plan C, plan D ready to go in case you have a situation where somebody tests positive at a high level.
Well, how about this? How about Dino, fresh off the negative test, jumping right back into the fire by doing the radio show on location at Heritage Hill. He said it in the summer during talking season when NIL was a big discussion point nationally. He said, he's really looking forward to these guys learning about contracts and what it means to live up and honor a contract. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, he's living that example by doing the show in a restaurant, literally a day after he has a scare. So. Hey, he signed the paper. He's doing the show out in Pompey, and by God, he's going to be there unless.
Hey, listen, I wouldn't miss a chance to go to that spot as well where he does that show. That's a great place, one of the best views in central New York. So can't blame him for that. But yeah, this goes to show you, the procedures and the tests and everything, and the contracts, and just kind of getting back to normal. And they took a lot of precautions in doing that, of course. But that could pop up, and it's interesting that it didn't really last year. And here we are this year, and the Dome. Our friend Chris Carlson wrote a story about this today, that maybe they're going to be a little more stringent in terms of the policies, wearing masks and things that are in place at the Carrier Dome. So just know that if you're going to the game this weekend, all those policies are still in place about masking inside the Carrier Dome, unless you're actively eating or drinking. Having the negative COVID test. If you have kids between the age of 5 and 11. They need a negative COVID test, a PCR test within 72 hours, an antigen test within 6 hours to get in the facility. Otherwise, those 12 and over need to be vaccinated or show the same negative test. So keep that in mind. All those procedures are in place. And Pete Salas saying maybe they're going to ask people a little bit more to follow the masking rule, in particular the student section. And the good news there, Nate, was that was one of the biggest student sections Syracuse had in recent memory at that game last week. 6,000 strong in the student section. I don't know if Albany will be the same appeal as it was last week. Sometimes when a team loses a game like that, it can kind of pop the bubble of enthusiasm, but we'll see what kind of crowd we have for this one. It's only about 30,000 in change at the Rutgers game, and we'll see what the crowd looks like there. And I just wanted to note in a little self-promotion here. One name we're going to see out there, Nate, for Albany is Danny D'Amico. He is a CBA grad, all Central New York high school football in 2016. 5-year player for Albany. He's their second leading tackler. If you're at the Dome Saturday, you're going to run into a member of the D'Amico family. He's got a lot of family and friends coming to this game. So a cool local connection on the Albany roster. And I was surprised, Nate, the only Central New York player on the roster, if you want to keep it to Syracuse. There's some Rochester kids. There's some guys that I think you could technically say are Central New York, but the only Syracuse area player on Albany is Danny, and he's a real standout for them. So keep an eye on him. Number 44, appropriately enough, out on the field.
Great player. Actually, when it was time for us to pick our Mr. Football in 2016, Casey Brown, shout out to the CBA head coach, corrected our stats and said, hey, you guys shortchanged him on tackles by about 100. By about 100. So if you look at his bio on Albany's athletics website, they use Casey's correction from our Mr. Football article, and they credited him his senior season at CBA with 197 tackles, 44 tackles for loss.
Incredible.
So he was a tackling machine, had looks and offers, I believe, from Cornell and Monmouth down in New Jersey coming out of CBA, obviously stuck at Albany, and has been one of their better players, like you alluded to. I believe he eclipsed the 100-yard tackle mark in 2019. That was their last full fall season. He was the team's leading tackler in their 4-game spring season just a few months ago, and I believe he's on pace to have another really, really strong season this year for the Great Dane. And like you mentioned, 44, he's appropriately will be hard to miss on the field on Saturday as well.
Nate, I want to highlight a comment here from our friend Q Sports 44 who's watching on Twitter. For a coach who's on the hot seat, that penalty on him last week was inexplicable. I'm going to disagree with you, Q Sports 44. I'll meet you halfway. What to me was inexplicable a week ago was the punt. 7.5 minutes to go, down by 2 scores. 4th and 10, not an easy thing to convert, particularly with an offense that was struggling, but I felt like that's a situation you go for it. The penalty, that was a joke on the sense of the officiating crew, because right before that, Greg Schiano from Rutgers threw an absolute hissy fit on the field, on the sideline, before, during, and after a timeout, just in the face of the officials for an extended period of time. Certainly called for if you're going to throw that penalty flag on the field. So for Dino to get out there, I'm not going to completely excuse him from doing that, because coaches have to be more careful and not put their team in a position to do that. But for Schiano to get nothing and for Babers to get a flag on that was the inexplicable part. That was the joke. Babers is not a guy that picks up a lot of penalties in that situation. So there are certainly some things we can be critical of. That's not one of them. So I'm going to disagree with you on that one. A coach has to know better. But if Schiano's out there just completely melting down and gets nothing, and they throw the flag on Dino, that's on the officials. And you go back to last week, that Big Ten officiating crew, let's just say not efficient, and I'll kind of leave it at that. And let's hope the officiating's a little better in this matchup. But
we actually don't have all the information on that either. I reached out to the Big Ten office earlier this week to ask for an explanation on what prompted the official to throw the penalty flag on Dino, and
got nothing back, huh?
Got no even acknowledgement that my query has been delivered. So suffice it to say, they will not have a comment on what actually prompted the penalty flag. Dino, after the game, was asked about it, and he said he did not use profanity. He said that they must have not liked his English or whatever he said might have upset them, but officially we do not know what triggered that penalty flag. So maybe one day when those officials are out of it, maybe we'll get the scoop.
I think that's part of the problem, though, is they can do these things and they don't have to explain themselves. A coach has to go to a press conference and explain every move he makes. Players have to do the same thing. The officials, I don't have to tell you anything, right? Especially,
which is surprising.
Very surprising.
You see officials now welcome that accountability. You have replay booth officials who are literally part of these broadcasts now. And, there's been some high profile examples, specifically in the Pac-12, and even in the ACC a few years back. I remember that crazy kickoff with Duke and Miami with Corn Elder,
Yes.
and there's a million blocking the backs that just were not called. And, Duke had God forbid, imagine that happening, and see what kind of gripes some SU fans would have rather than a 15-yard penalty in the middle of a game. But you thought that we were in a place where there would be more accountability from the officials. They wanted that accountability. They wanted that transparency, and to come up short or fall short of that here. Can't say it's unexpected or I'm surprised, but there is an effort, I think, to do better.
But it is frustrating when they have too much of a presence. And you brought up replay. Replay's supposed to solve these problems. I mean, last week, Taj Harris's knee was clearly down. They called a fumble on that. So as much as we gripe, get the call right. Even the tools they're handed to get the call right. And I don't blame them in a sense in that call, Nate, because they needed, irrefutable evidence to overturn it. The camera angle and the way it was shown, they couldn't do that. They couldn't overturn the call on the field by procedure. But the bigger point being these guys just do this stuff and they're not held accountable and they're part of the game. And, we'll see if that changes going forward, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. So just some closing thoughts, Nate. Appreciate all the great comments. Let me throw a question out there before we go, Nate, because Q Sports wants to know, what do we make of Sherrod Johnson? Syracuse needs a wide receiver to step up other than Taj. Is it Alford? Is it Arande? Maybe we'll see that this week, given kind of the lab experiment that Albany has the potential to be. But what do you think of Q Sports' question there specifically about Sherrod?
Well, Sherrod's a fifth-year guy from Booker T. Washington down in Florida, and he's been around the block. He's been in the program for a while. Those guys like Alford, those guys like Gadsden, Amari Hatcher, Kendall Long, some of those young guys that have a lot of nice physical traits that you glance at the roster and you think, oh, that probably translates really well to the field. You sacrifice something if you play a young guy, and what you tend to sacrifice is knowledge and experience and knowing what you're supposed to be doing out there. And I think, as we've seen in the throwing game the last couple seasons, you got to have guys that know what route to run, when to run it, how to read a defense, and how they maybe have to react post snap based on what the coverage is. And you'd think that Sherrod, being an older guy, maybe has that part down more so than some of the younger guys on the roster. And again, it's a trade-off, right? So sure, did Sherrod draft a couple passes last week? Yes, we all saw it, plain sight. Alfred was out there for a few plays. So he's getting his feet wet. The staff is still optimistic and high on some of those young guys in the program. Obviously, they're on the two deep for a reason. But it's a balance, and if you throw all your eggs in the physical trait basket, and it comes at the expense of a penalty or running the route wrong or something small that maybe to the naked eye you don't think you catch right away, but it leads to an interception or it leads to a sack or it leads to an injury with the quarterback having to hang on to the ball too long because the receiver didn't do what he was supposed to be doing. There are real ramifications to playing guys who aren't ready and don't have that full knowledge of the playbook. And so I think Dino has talked about this from early in the season. He was going to lean on his older guys. And I think that is by design. I think that's by a reason. That has how he has played this pretty consistently throughout his tenure, is he's going to give the older guys who have been in the program the longest, who have gone through the strength and conditioning program, who are physically able to handle a 12-game grind. He is going to ride those guys as long as he can until he is forced to make a move. And to some degree, we saw this a little bit last year when, he played Culpepper week after week, despite a lot of questions and bewilderment as to why he wasn't throwing Dylan out there or Jacobian out there earlier. And, again, it's a balance. It's a touch thing. And sometimes you got to trust the guy who sees these guys day in and day out on the practice field.
And we'll end on that note. Thanks to everybody who popped in today. Appreciate that. Usually, again, keep this in mind, we do this live Thursdays on Facebook, on our Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page, on Twitter. You can follow me at Brent X Media, follow Nate at Mink Nate, and on our YouTube page. Now, if you do miss it live, nice little YouTube video pops up for you on our YouTube page. So subscribe to Orange Sports on YouTube. We'll put a post up on syracuse.com as well, so you can hop in there and watch it later on in case you missed it. So we'll be back Thursday and a big game to preview then. And Nate, they'll be playing the next day. So one of these Friday Night Lights games to come against Liberty. But first, we'll see how the Orange take care of business against Albany tomorrow. Look for all of our coverage on syracuse.com throughout the day, Saturday, and of course on Sunday through the weekend as well. Nate, thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. And we'll see you again soon, my friend.
Can't wait.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.